What would you do if you were judged for the color of your skin, the love in your heart, or the family you chose to build? Would you stay silent, or would you fight back? This is a story about courage, prejudice, and the shocking moment that changed everything. But before we dive in, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell, because what happens next will leave you speechless. The plane was cruising at 35,000 feet. The hum of the engines a steady backdrop to the tension brewing in row 12. Marcus, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a warm smile and kind eyes, adjusted the blanket over his sleeping 6-year-old daughter, Lily. Her head rested gently on his arm, her braids spilling over his sleeve. She looked peaceful, but Marcus could feel the weight of the stares from the woman across the aisle. Karen, because of course her name was Karen, had been side-eyeing him since he boarded the plane. She was in her mid-50s, with a sharp bob, oversized sunglasses perched on her head, and a permanent scowl etched into her face. She had already complained to the flight attendant about the temperature, the seat spacing, and the unnecessary noise from a toddler 2 rows back. But now, her attention was fully on Marcus and Lily. "Is she yours?" Karen finally asked, her voice dripping with disdain. Marcus looked up, startled. "Excuse me?" "The girl. Is she yours?" Karen repeated, her tone sharper this time. She gestured toward Lily as if she were an object, not a child. Marcus felt a familiar knot tighten in his stomach. He had faced this kind of judgment before, but it never got easier. "Yes, she's my daughter," he said firmly, his voice steady despite the anger simmering beneath the surface. Karen raised an eyebrow, her lips curling into a smirk. "Really? She doesn't look like you. Are you sure you didn't, take her from somewhere?" The words hung in the air like a storm cloud, heavy and suffocating. Marcus clenched his fists, his mind racing. How could someone be so cruel, so quick to assume the worst? He glanced at Lily, still asleep, unaware of the ugliness unfolding just inches away. He wanted to protect her from this, from people like Karen who saw the world in black and white, literally and figuratively. Before Marcus could respond, a flight attendant appeared, her smile polite but strained. "Is everything okay here?" she asked, glancing between Marcus and Karen. Karen leaned back in her seat, crossing her arms. "I'm just asking questions. Isn't that allowed? I mean, it's not every day you see a man like him with a child like her." The flight attendant's smile faltered, but before she could say anything, Marcus stood up. He was towering over Karen now, his presence commanding the attention of everyone nearby. "Listen," he said, his voice low but firm. "This is my daughter. I adopted her because I wanted to give her a loving home. And if you have a problem with that, keep it to yourself." The cabin fell silent, the tension so thick you could cut it with a knife. Karen opened her mouth to retort, but then something unexpected happened. A man in the row behind her stood up. He was in his 40s with salt and pepper hair and a kind face. "Ma'am, you need to stop," he said, his voice calm but firm. "What you're doing is wrong, and you know it." Karen blinked, caught off guard. "Excuse me? Who do you think you are?" "I'm someone who believes in treating people with respect," the man replied. "And right now, you're not doing that." The flight attendant nodded in agreement. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to refrain from making any further comments. If you continue, we may have to take further action." Karen's face turned red, her lips pressed into a thin line. She muttered something under her breath, but didn't say anything else. Marcus sat back down, his heart still pounding. He glanced at the man who had stood up for him and gave him a grateful nod. The man smiled back, a silent acknowledgement of solidarity. But just when it seemed like the situation had calmed down, Karen did something that shocked everyone. She reached into her bag, pulled out her phone, and started recording Marcus and Lily. "I'm just documenting this," she said loudly, as if daring anyone to stop her. "People need to know what's really going on here." Marcus felt a surge of panic. He didn't want Lily to wake up and see this, to be exposed to such blatant racism and hatred. He looked at the flight attendant, his eyes pleading. "Can you please make her stop?" The flight attendant hesitated, clearly unsure of what to do. But then, the man who had spoken up earlier stepped in again. "Ma'am, put your phone away," he said firmly. "You're violating their privacy, and if you don't stop, I'll report you to the authorities when we land." Karen glared at him, but finally put her phone away. The cabin was quiet again, but the tension lingered. Marcus held Lily a little tighter, his mind racing with questions. What would happen when they landed? Would Karen try to cause more trouble? And how could he protect his daughter from people like her? As the plane began its descent, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Little did he know, the real shock was yet to come. What will happen when the plane lands? Will Karen try to escalate the situation? And how will Marcus protect his daughter from the ugliness of the world? Stay tuned for the next chapter, because this story is far from over. The plane touched down with a gentle bump, and the passengers began gathering their belongings. Marcus kept a protective arm around Lily, who was now awake and rubbing her eyes. She looked up at him, her innocent smile a stark contrast to the tension still lingering in the air. "Daddy, are we there yet?" she asked, her voice soft and sleepy. "Yes, sweetheart," Marcus replied, forcing a smile. "We're here." Karen, meanwhile, was already on her feet, shoving her way into the aisle with her oversized tote bag. She shot Marcus one last glare before storming off toward the front of the plane. Marcus exhaled slowly, relieved to see her go. Maybe, just maybe, that would be the end of it. But as he and Lily made their way off the plane, Marcus couldn't shake the uneasy feeling in his gut. The airport was bustling with people, and he kept a firm grip on Lily's hand as they navigated through the crowd. They were almost a baggage claim when he heard it. A familiar voice, sharp and accusatory. "That's him. That's the man I was telling you about." Marcus turned to see Karen standing with two airport security officers, pointing directly at him. His heart sank. What was she doing now? "Sir, can we have a word?" one of the officers asked, stepping forward. He was tall and broad-shouldered, his expression neutral but firm. Marcus hesitated, glancing down at Lily. She looked up at him, her eyes wide with confusion. "Daddy, what's going on?" "It's okay, sweetheart," Marcus said, though his voice betrayed his anxiety. He knelt down to her level. "These officers just need to talk to me for a minute. Can you stand right here and hold my hand?" Lily nodded, clutching his hand tightly. Marcus straightened up and faced the officers. "What's this about?" Karen stepped forward, her arms crossed. "I'm just looking out for this child's safety. I mean, look at him. Does he really seem like the kind of man who should be responsible for a little girl?" Marcus felt his blood boil, but he kept his composure. "I'm her father," he said firmly. "I adopted her legally, and I have all the paperwork to prove it." The officers exchanged a glance. "Sir, we're just doing our job," the second officer said. "If you could come with us to answer a few questions, we'd appreciate it." Marcus clenched his jaw. He didn't want to make a scene, especially not in front of Lily, but he also wasn't about to let Karen's baseless accusations go unchallenged. "Fine," he said, "but my daughter stays with me." The officers nodded, and they all began walking toward a small office near the baggage claim. Karen trailed behind, a smug look on her face. Marcus could feel the stares of other passengers as they passed, their whispers adding to the weight of the situation. Once inside the office, the officers asked Marcus to provide identification and any documentation he had regarding Lily's adoption. He handed over his driver's license and a folder containing the legal papers, his hands trembling slightly. Lily clung to his side, her small frame pressed against his leg. As the officers reviewed the documents, Karen hovered nearby, clearly waiting for them to find something, anything, that would prove her right. But after a few tense minutes, the first officer looked up and nodded. "Everything checks out. You're free to go, sir." Marcus let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "Thank you," he said, taking the documents back. Karen, however, wasn't satisfied. "Are you serious?" she snapped. "You're just going to let him go? What if he's lying? What if he's—" "Ma'am," the second officer interrupted, his tone firm. "We've verified his documents. There's no reason to detain him further. If you have any additional concerns, you'll need to file a formal report." Karen's face turned red with frustration, but she didn't say anything else. Marcus took Lily's hand and led her out of the office, his heart still racing. He couldn't believe what had just happened. How could someone be so determined to cause trouble, so unwilling to see the truth? As they walked toward baggage claim, Marcus noticed a woman standing nearby, watching them intently. She was in her 30s with curly hair and a kind smile. She approached them cautiously, as if unsure whether to speak. "Excuse me," she said softly. "I just wanted to say, I saw what happened back there, and I'm so sorry you had to go through that. You're a great dad, and your daughter is lucky to have you." Marcus felt a lump form in his throat. "Thank you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "That means a lot." The woman smiled and walked away, leaving Marcus and Lily alone once more. But as they waited for their luggage, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Karen's actions had left a mark, and he knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Little did he know, the events of the day were about to take an even more unexpected turn. As they stepped outside to hail a cab, Marcus noticed a crowd gathering near the entrance. At the center of it all was Karen, her voice loud and shrill as she spoke to a group of people holding cameras and microphones. "This man is a danger to that child," she shouted, pointing directly at Marcus. "And I'm not going to stop until someone does something about it." Marcus froze, his heart pounding in his chest. What had she done now? The crowd turned toward Marcus and Lily, the cameras clicking and flashing as reporters began shouting questions. Marcus shielded Lily with his body, his mind racing. How had things escalated so quickly? And how was he supposed to protect his daughter from this? The chaos was just beginning. The cacophony of voices and flashing cameras felt like a tidal wave crashing over Marcus. He tightened his grip on Lily's hand, shielding her with his body as the reporters closed in. Questions flew at him from every direction, each one more invasive than the last. "Sir, is it true you've been accused of kidnapping this child? Can you confirm your relationship with the girl? What do you have to say about the allegations against you?" Marcus's mind raced. He knew he had to stay calm for Lily's sake, but the sheer audacity of the situation was overwhelming. Karen stood at the edge of the crowd, her arms crossed and a smug look on her face. She had clearly called the media, hoping to turn her baseless accusations into a public spectacle. "I'm her father," Marcus said firmly, his voice cutting through the noise. "I adopted her legally, and I have all the paperwork to prove it. This woman," he pointed at Karen, "is spreading lies because she can't mind her own business." The reporters turned their cameras toward Karen, who immediately began defending herself. "I'm just looking out for the child's safety," she shouted. "Someone has to ask the hard questions." Marcus had had enough. He scooped Lily into his arms and began pushing his way through the crowd, ignoring the reporters' persistent questions. He needed to get Lily out of there, away from the chaos and the prying eyes. As he broke free from the crowd, he spotted a cab pulling up to the curb. He rushed toward it, yanking the door open and sliding inside with Lily. "Drive," he said to the cab driver, his voice urgent. "Just drive." The cab pulled away from the curb, leaving the chaos behind. Marcus leaned back in his seat, his heart still pounding. Lily looked up at him, her eyes wide with fear. "Daddy, why were those people yelling at us?" Marcus sighed, running a hand over his face. "They were just confused, sweetheart. They didn't understand that I'm your daddy, and that I love you very much." Lily nodded, but her lower lip trembled. "I don't like them." "I don't either," Marcus admitted, pulling her close. "But we're going to be okay. I promise." The cab ride was quiet, the tension slowly easing as they put distance between themselves and the airport. Marcus kept glancing out the window, half expecting to see a news van following them. But the streets were clear, and by the time they reached their hotel, he felt a small measure of relief. They checked in and made their way to their room, where Marcus immediately set about making Lily feel safe. He ordered room service, turned on her favorite cartoon, and sat with her on the bed, his arm around her small shoulders. For a little while, it felt like things might be okay. But as the evening wore on, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling of unease. He pulled out his phone and hesitated before opening social media. Sure enough, the incident at the airport was already trending. Videos of Karen's accusations and his confrontation with the reporters had gone viral, and the comments were a mixed bag of support and vitriol. "This is why people shouldn't adopt outside their race," one comment read. "That poor child deserves better," another said. But there were also messages of support. "Ignore the haters. You're doing an amazing job. Karen needs to mind her own business. You're a great dad." Marcus closed the app, his hands trembling. He didn't want to be the center of attention, and he certainly didn't want Lily exposed to this kind of negativity. But he also knew that staying silent wasn't an option. If Karen's lies were allowed to spread unchecked, it could have serious consequences for him and Lily. As he sat there, lost in thought, his phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. He hesitated before answering. "Hello? Hi. Is this Marcus?" a woman's voice asked. It was calm and professional, but there was an edge of urgency to it. "Yes, this is he. Who's calling?" "My name is Sarah Bennett. I'm a reporter with the Daily Beacon. I saw what happened at the airport, and I'd like to give you a chance to tell your side of the story." Marcus frowned. "I'm not interested in talking to the media." "I understand," Sarah said quickly. "But right now, the only narrative out there is the one Karen is pushing. If you don't speak up, people are going to believe her. This could affect you and your daughter in ways you haven't even considered." Marcus sighed, running a hand over his face. She had a point, but the thought of putting himself and Lily in the spotlight was terrifying. "I'll think about it," he said finally. "But no promises." "That's all I ask," Sarah replied. "Here's my number if you change your mind." "And Marcus, for what it's worth, I think you're doing an incredible thing for that little girl." The call ended, and Marcus sat in silence, his mind racing. He looked over at Lily, who was now fast asleep, her tiny hand clutching the edge of the blanket. She looked so peaceful, so innocent. He couldn't let Karen's lies ruin that. But as he sat there, his phone buzzed again, this time with a text from an unknown number. He opened it, and his blood ran cold. The message was short and to the point. "You think you've won? This is just the beginning." Marcus stared at the screen, his heart pounding. Who had sent this? Was it Karen? Or someone else? Before he could process the message, another one came through, a photo of him and Lily leaving the airport, with the caption, "We're watching." Marcus's hands trembled as he set the phone down. This wasn't just about Karen anymore. Someone was targeting him, and they weren't going to stop until they got what they wanted. But what did they want? And how far were they willing to go? The room felt colder now, the shadows darker. Marcus glanced at Lily, her peaceful face a stark contrast to the storm brewing around them. He knew he had to do something, but what? And who could he trust? The night stretched on, silent and heavy with uncertainty. But one thing was clear, this was far from over. The next morning, Marcus woke up to the sound of Lily giggling. She was sitting on the floor, playing with the stuffed bunny she'd brought on the trip, completely unaware of the storm swirling around them. Marcus watched her for a moment, his heart aching with a mix of love and fear. He had to protect her, no matter what. He checked his phone, half expecting another threatening message, but there was nothing. For now, at least, it seemed quiet. He took a deep breath and decided to focus on the day ahead. They were in a new city, and he didn't want Lily's trip to be ruined by Karen or whoever was behind those messages. "Hey, sweetheart," Marcus said, forcing a smile. "How about we go explore today? Maybe find a park or a museum?" Lily's eyes lit up. "Can we get ice cream too?" Marcus chuckled. "Of course we can, but only after lunch, deal?" "Deal," Lily said, jumping to her feet. They spent the morning wandering the city, visiting a nearby park where Lily ran around and played on the swings. Marcus kept a close eye on their surroundings, his nerves on edge. Every time someone glanced their way, he wondered if they recognized him from the viral videos. But no one approached them, and for a little while, it felt like they were just a normal father and daughter enjoying a day out. By lunchtime, they found a small cafe with outdoor seating. Marcus ordered sandwiches and lemonade, and they sat at a table under a large umbrella. Lily chattered away about the park and the pigeons she'd seen, her innocence a bright spot in an otherwise dark situation. But as they ate, Marcus noticed a man sitting at a nearby table, watching them intently. He was in his 40s with a scruffy beard and a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. Marcus's stomach tightened. Was he just being paranoid, or was this man following them? He tried to shake off the feeling, but when they left the cafe, he glanced over his shoulder and saw the man getting up too. Marcus quickened his pace, holding Lily's hand tightly. They turned a corner, and Marcus ducked into a small bookstore, hoping to lose the man in the crowd. Inside, he pretended to browse the shelves while keeping an eye on the door. A few minutes passed, and the man didn't appear. Marcus let out a sigh of relief, but his nerves were still frayed. He couldn't keep living like this, constantly looking over his shoulder. "Daddy, can we get this?" Lily asked, holding up a picture book about dinosaurs. Marcus forced a smile. "Sure, sweetheart. Let's get it." They paid for the book and left the store, but as they stepped outside, Marcus's phone buzzed. It was another text from the unknown number. "You can't hide forever." Marcus's heart raced. He looked around, but the man from the cafe was nowhere to be seen. Who was sending these messages? And how did they know where he was? He decided it was time to take action. He called Sarah Bennett, the reporter who had reached out to him the night before. She answered on the second ring. "Marcus? I'm glad you called," she said. "Have you thought about my offer?" "I have," Marcus replied, his voice low. "But before I agree to anything, I need to know if I can trust you." "You can," Sarah said without hesitation. "I'm not here to sensationalize your story. I want to help you set the record straight." "What's going on?" Marcus hesitated, then told her about the threatening messages and the man he thought was following them. Sarah listened quietly, then said, "That's serious, Marcus. You need to report this to the police." "I will," Marcus said. "But I also need to protect Lily. If I do an interview with you, can you guarantee it won't make things worse?" "I can't control how people will react," Sarah admitted. "But I can promise to tell your story with integrity. And sometimes the best way to fight back against lies is with the truth." Marcus took a deep breath. "Okay, let's do it." They arranged to meet later that afternoon at a quiet coffee shop. Marcus spent the rest of the day trying to keep Lily entertained and distracted, but his mind was elsewhere. He couldn't stop thinking about the threats and the man who had been watching them. Was Karen behind all of this? Or was someone else pulling the strings? When it was time to meet Sarah, Marcus felt a mix of relief and anxiety. He didn't know if he was making the right decision, but he knew he couldn't stay silent anymore. Sarah was already at the coffee shop when they arrived. She stood up to greet them, her smile warm and reassuring. "Hi, Marcus. And you must be Lily," she said, crouching down to Lily's level. "I love your bunny. What's his name?" "Mr. Hops," Lily said shyly. "That's a great name," Sarah said with a grin. She straightened up and looked at Marcus. "Shall we get started?" They found a quiet corner, and Sarah set up a recorder. Marcus held Lily on his lap, his arms wrapped protectively around her as he began to tell his story. He talked about adopting Lily, the challenges they'd faced, and the love they shared. He also talked about Karen and the incident on the plane, his voice trembling with anger as he described her accusations. Sarah listened intently, occasionally asking questions to clarify details. When Marcus mentioned the threatening messages, her expression turned serious. "Have you reported this to the police?" she asked. "Not yet," Marcus admitted. "But I will. I didn't want to drag Lily into all of this." "I understand," Sarah said softly. "But your safety and hers is the most important thing." The interview lasted about an hour, and by the end, Marcus felt a strange sense of relief. He didn't know how people would react to the story, but at least he was taking control of the narrative. As they left the coffee shop, Sarah handed him her card. "If you need anything at all, don't hesitate to call me." Marcus nodded. "Thank you for everything." They parted ways, and Marcus took Lily back to the hotel. He felt a little lighter, but the weight of the situation was still there, pressing down on him. He knew the fight wasn't over, not by a long shot. That night, as he tucked Lily into bed, she looked up at him with her big, innocent eyes. "Daddy, are we going to be okay?" Marcus kissed her forehead. "Yes, sweetheart. We're going to be just fine." But as he lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, he couldn't shake the feeling that something big was coming. The calm before the storm, perhaps. And when it hit, he would have to be ready. The next morning, Marcus woke up to a notification on his phone. Sarah's article had been published, and it was already going viral. The headline read, "Black adoptive father speaks out. Love doesn't have a color." Marcus clicked on the link, his heart pounding as he began to read. The article was powerful, heartfelt, and unflinching in its condemnation of Karen's actions. The comments were pouring in, most of them supportive, but a few were hateful and cruel. Before he could process it all, his phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. "Marcus," a man's voice said. It was deep and gravelly, sending a chill down Marcus's spine. You shouldn't have done that. The line went dead, and Marcus's blood ran cold. He looked over at Lily, still asleep in her bed, and knew that the storm had finally arrived. And it was going to be worse than he ever imagined. The ominous call left Marcus frozen, his phone still clutched in his hand. The man's voice echoed in his mind, a chilling reminder that whoever was behind this wasn't going to stop. He glanced at Lily, still asleep, her tiny chest rising and falling peacefully. He couldn't let her get caught in the crossfire of whatever was coming. Marcus quickly dialed the police, his voice trembling as he explained the threatening calls and messages. The officer on the line assured him they would look into it, but Marcus knew it wouldn't be enough. He needed to take matters into his own hands. He called Sarah Bennett next. She answered on the first ring, her voice tense. "Marcus, I was just about to call you. The article's blowing up, and not everyone's happy about it. Are you okay?" "No," Marcus admitted. "I just got another call. Someone told me I shouldn't have spoken out. Sarah, I think they're coming for me." Sarah was silent for a moment, then said, "Listen to me. You need to get somewhere safe. Do you have any friends or family nearby?" "No," Marcus said. "We're in a hotel, but I don't feel safe here anymore." "Okay," Sarah said quickly. "I have a friend who runs a small bed and breakfast outside the city. It's quiet, out of the way. I'll call her and arrange for you to stay there. Can you pack up and be ready to leave in 30 minutes? Marcus hesitated. "I don't want to drag you into this." "You're not dragging me into anything," Sarah said firmly. "I'm already in it. Now go pack. I'll text you the address." Marcus hung up and immediately began gathering their things. He woke Lily gently, telling her they were going on a little adventure. She rubbed her eyes and nodded, too sleepy to ask questions. Within 20 minutes, they were checked out of the hotel and in a cab, heading toward the address Sarah had sent. The bed and breakfast was a quaint, secluded house surrounded by trees. Sarah's friend, a kind woman named Margaret, greeted them at the door. "You must be Marcus and Lily," she said with a warm smile. "Sarah told me you needed a quiet place to stay. Come on in." Marcus thanked her, his nerves still on edge. Margaret showed them to a cozy room on the second floor with a view of the woods. "You'll be safe here," she assured him. "No one knows about this place except my regular guests, and they're all good people." Marcus nodded, though he couldn't shake the feeling that nowhere was truly safe. He set Lily up with her stuffed bunny and the dinosaur book they'd bought earlier, then stepped outside to call Sarah. "I'm here," he said when she answered. "Thank you for this." "Of course," Sarah said. "Now listen, I've been doing some digging, and I think I know who's behind the threats." Marcus's heart skipped a beat. "Oh, Karen's husband," Sarah said. "His name is Greg, and he's got a history of, let's just say, not playing nice. He's been involved in a few shady things over the years, and I think he's the one harassing you." Marcus clenched his fists. "Why? What does he want?" "I don't know yet," Sarah admitted, "but I'm going to find out. In the meantime, stay put and keep Lily close. I'll keep you updated." The call ended, and Marcus sat on the edge of the bed, his mind racing. He thought about Karen's smug face, her relentless accusations. Was her husband really behind this? And if so, what was his endgame? The rest of the day passed quietly. Margaret brought them homemade soup and fresh bread for dinner, and Lily seemed to enjoy the change of scenery. But as night fell, Marcus's anxiety grew. He kept checking the windows, half expecting to see someone lurking in the shadows. Around midnight, his phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "I've got something. Call me." Marcus stepped into the hallway, closing the door softly behind him so he wouldn't wake Lily. He dialed Sarah's number, his heart pounding. "What did you find?" he asked as soon as she answered. "Greg's been arrested before," Sarah said, "for stalking and harassment. He's got a record, Marcus. And get this, he's been active on some pretty nasty online forums. Racist, anti-adoption, the whole 9 yards. I think he's the one sending you those messages." Marcus felt a surge of anger. "What do we do?" "I'm working on it," Sarah said, "but I need you to stay where you are. Greg's dangerous. And if he finds out where you are—" "He won't," Marcus said firmly. "I'll make sure of it." The call ended, and Marcus returned to the room. Lily was still asleep, her face peaceful in the moonlight. He sat on the edge of the bed, watching her, his mind racing. He couldn't let Greg, or anyone else, hurt her. He would do whatever it took to keep her safe. But as the hours passed, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. The threats, the messages, the man following them. It was all building to something, and he didn't know if he was ready for what was coming. The next morning, Marcus woke up to the sound of birds chirping outside the window. Lily was already awake, sitting on the floor and flipping through her dinosaur book. For a moment, everything felt normal. But then his phone buzzed, shattering the illusion. It was a text from Sarah. "Greg's been spotted near the city. Be on high alert." Marcus's stomach dropped. He quickly packed their things, his hands trembling. They couldn't stay here anymore. He needed to get Lily somewhere even safer, somewhere Greg would never think to look. But as he zipped up their suitcase, he heard a noise downstairs, a door creaking open, followed by muffled voices. Marcus froze, his heart pounding. Was it Margaret? Or had Greg found them? He crept to the door and peered into the hallway. The voices grew louder, and then he heard it. A man's voice, low and menacing. "Where are they?" Marcus's blood ran cold. It was Greg. He had found them. Marcus closed the door softly and locked it, his mind racing. He had to get Lily out of there. But how? The window was their only option. He rushed to it, pulling it open and looking down. It was a 2-story drop, but there was a tree with thick branches just below. "Lily," he whispered, crouching down to her level. "We're going to play a game, okay? We need to climb out the window and be really, really quiet. Can you do that?" Lily nodded, her eyes wide but trusting. Marcus helped her onto the windowsill, then climbed out after her. He held her tightly as they shimmied down the tree, his heart pounding with every step. When they reached the ground, Marcus grabbed Lily's hand and ran toward the woods. He didn't know where they were going, but he knew they had to get as far away as possible. Behind them, he heard a shout. "They're getting away!" Marcus didn't look back. He just ran, clutching Lily's hand, praying they could outrun the danger. But as they disappeared into the trees, he knew one thing for certain. This wasn't over. Not even close. The woods were dense, the trees towering overhead and blocking out most of the sunlight. Marcus kept a firm grip on Lily's hand as they ran, their footsteps crunching against the forest floor. He didn't know where they were going, only that they needed to put as much distance between themselves and Greg as possible. "Daddy, I'm tired," Lily whispered, her voice trembling. "I know, sweetheart," Marcus said, glancing over his shoulder. "Just a little farther, okay? We need to find a safe place to hide." Lily nodded, her small legs struggling to keep up. Marcus scooped her into his arms, ignoring the ache in his muscles as he pressed on. He could still hear voices behind them, distant but closing in. Greg wasn't going to give up easily. After what felt like an eternity, Marcus spotted a small clearing up ahead. In the center was an old, abandoned shed, its wooden walls weathered and covered in moss. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. He hurried toward it, carefully setting Lily down as he tried the door. It creaked open, revealing a dark, musty interior. "Stay close to me," Marcus whispered, leading Lily inside. He closed the door behind them, plunging them into near darkness. The only light came from a small, cracked window near the ceiling. Marcus crouched down, pulling Lily into his arms. "We're going to be okay," he said softly, though he wasn't sure if he was trying to reassure her or himself. "We just need to stay quiet until they're gone." Lily nodded, clutching her stuffed bunny tightly. They sat in silence, the only sound their shallow breathing and the distant rustle of leaves outside. Marcus strained his ears, listening for any sign that Greg and his men were nearby. Minutes passed, each one feeling like an hour. Then Marcus heard it, the sound of footsteps approaching the shed. He held his breath, his heart pounding in his chest. The footsteps stopped just outside, and he could hear muffled voices. They couldn't have gone far, a man's voice said. It was Greg. "Search the area. They're here somewhere." Marcus's mind raced. If they searched the shed, there was no way he and Lily could stay hidden. He looked around the small space, searching for anything he could use to defend them. In the corner, he spotted a rusted shovel leaning against the wall. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. He grabbed the shovel and positioned himself between Lily and the door, his hands trembling as he gripped the handle. The door creaked open, and a beam of light cut through the darkness. Marcus held his breath, ready to strike if necessary. But then a voice called out from the distance. "Greg, over here! I think I found something." The door stopped moving, and Marcus heard Greg curse under his breath. "Coming!" he shouted, stepping away from the shed. The door swung shut, and the footsteps faded into the distance. Marcus let out a shaky breath, his legs nearly giving out beneath him. They had been so close, too close. He turned to Lily, who was staring up at him with wide, frightened eyes. "It's okay," he whispered, pulling her into a tight hug. "They're gone now." But Marcus knew they weren't safe yet. Greg and his men were still out there, and it was only a matter of time before they circled back. He needed to come up with a plan, and fast. He pulled out his phone, relieved to see he still had a weak signal. He dialed Sarah's number, his hands shaking as he held the phone to his ear. "Marcus?" Sarah answered, her voice filled with concern. "Where are you? Are you okay?" "We're in the woods near the bed and breakfast," Marcus whispered. "Greg found us. We're hiding, but I don't know how long we can stay here." Sarah was silent for a moment, then said, "I'm sending help. Stay where you are, and don't make a sound. I'll call you back as soon as I can." The call ended, and Marcus slipped the phone back into his pocket. He crouched down next to Lily, wrapping his arms around her. "Help is coming," he said softly. "We just have to hold on a little longer." Lily nodded, burying her face in his chest. They sat in silence, the minutes dragging by as they waited for Sarah's help to arrive. Marcus kept his eyes on the door, the shovel still clutched in his hand. He wouldn't let anyone hurt Lily, not while he was still breathing. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Marcus heard the sound of sirens in the distance. His heart leapt with hope as the sound grew louder, closer. He peeked out the cracked window and saw flashing lights through the trees. "They're here," he whispered to Lily. "We're going to be okay." But as the sirens grew louder, Marcus heard another sound, the sound of footsteps running toward the shed. The door burst open, and Greg stood there, his face twisted with rage. "You think you've won?" Greg snarled, stepping inside. "You're not getting away that easily." Marcus tightened his grip on the shovel, stepping in front of Lily. "Stay back," he warned, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. Greg laughed, a cold, humorless sound. "You really think you can stop me?" Before Marcus could respond, a voice shouted from outside. "Freeze! Police!" Greg turned, his eyes widening as two police officers appeared in the doorway, their guns drawn. "Hands up!" one of them ordered. Greg hesitated, then slowly raised his hands. The officers moved in, cuffing him and leading him out of the shed. Marcus watched, his legs finally giving out as he sank to the floor, the shovel slipping from his grasp. "Daddy," Lily whispered, her voice trembling. "It's over," Marcus said, pulling her into his arms. "It's finally over." The police took Greg into custody, and Marcus and Lily were escorted out of the woods. Sarah arrived shortly after, her face filled with relief as she hugged Marcus tightly. "I'm so glad you're okay," she said. "I called the police as soon as I heard what was happening." "Thank you," Marcus said, his voice choked with emotion. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't." Sarah smiled, then crouched down to Lily's level. "And how are you, little one?" Lily looked up at her, her eyes still wide with fear. "I'm okay," she said softly. "Daddy kept me safe." Sarah's eyes filled with tears as she stood up. "You're both so brave." The police took Marcus and Lily to the station to give their statements. As they sat in the waiting room, Marcus felt a sense of relief wash over him. Greg was in custody, and the threats were over. But he knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. The media attention, the legal battles, it was all just beginning. But for now, he was just grateful to have Lily safe in his arms. They had survived the storm, and no matter what came next, they would face it together. As they left the police station, Marcus noticed a crowd gathered outside. Reporters and cameras were everywhere, their voices shouting questions as they pushed forward. Marcus shielded Lily with his body, his heart sinking. He had hoped for a moment of peace, but it seemed the world wasn't ready to let them go just yet. Sarah stepped in front of them, holding up her hands. "Give them some space," she shouted. "They've been through enough." The crowd hesitated, and Marcus took the opportunity to hurry Lily into a waiting car. As they drove away, he looked out the window, his mind racing. The fight wasn't over, not by a long shot, but for the first time in days, he felt a glimmer of hope. They were going to be okay. They had to be. The car ride was quiet, the hum of the engine a steady backdrop to Marcus's racing thoughts. Lily had fallen asleep in the back seat, her head resting against the window. Marcus glanced at her in the rearview mirror, his heart swelling with love and relief. They were safe for now. Sarah had arranged for them to stay at a friend's apartment in the city, a place Greg wouldn't know about. When they arrived, Sarah helped them inside, her presence a comforting constant in the chaos. "You'll be safe here," she said, handing Marcus the keys. "Take some time to rest. You've both been through so much." Marcus nodded, exhaustion weighing heavily on him. "Thank you, Sarah, for everything." She smiled, though her eyes were filled with concern. "I'll check in on you tomorrow. Try to get some sleep." After Sarah left, Marcus carried Lily to the bedroom and tucked her into bed. She stirred slightly, but didn't wake, her small hand clutching her stuffed bunny. Marcus kissed her forehead, then stepped into the living room, sinking onto the couch. His phone buzzed, and he pulled it out, expecting another message from Sarah. Instead, it was a notification from a news app. The headline made his stomach churn. "Black adoptive father and daughter targeted in harassment case." What happens next? Marcus clicked on the article, his heart pounding as he read. The story detailed everything. The incident on the plane, Karen's accusations, Greg's arrest, and their escape into the woods. The comments were a mix of outrage and support, but Marcus couldn't bring himself to read them. He didn't want to know what strangers thought of him or his family. He set his phone down, running a hand over his face. The media attention was overwhelming, and he didn't know how to navigate it. All he wanted was to protect Lily and give her a normal life, but it seemed like the world had other plans. The next morning, Marcus woke up to the sound of Lily giggling. She was sitting on the floor, playing with a set of blocks Sarah had left for her. Marcus smiled, the sound of her laughter a balm to his weary soul. "Good morning, sweetheart," he said, sitting up. "Did you sleep okay?" Lily nodded, holding up a block. "Look, Daddy, I made a tower." "That's amazing," Marcus said, his heart swelling with pride. "You're so smart." They spent the morning playing and eating breakfast, the apartment feeling like a small oasis of calm. But Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that their peace was fragile, that the storm wasn't truly over. Around noon, Sarah called. "How are you holding up?" she asked. "We're okay," Marcus said, glancing at Lily, who was now coloring at the table. "But I don't know what to do next. The media won't leave us alone, and I'm worried about what this is doing to Lily." Sarah sighed. "I know it's a lot, but you're not alone in this. There are people who want to help you. People who believe in you and your story." "Like who?" Marcus asked. "Like me," Sarah said, "and like the organization I reached out to. They're called Families Together, and they specialize in supporting adoptive families, especially those facing discrimination. They want to meet with you." Marcus hesitated. "I don't know, Sarah. I just want to protect Lily." "I understand," Sarah said gently. "But sometimes the best way to protect her is to stand up and fight. Families Together can help you do that. They can provide legal support, counseling, and a platform to share your story on your own terms." Marcus thought about it, his eyes drifting to Lily. She deserved a world where she could grow up safe and loved, free from prejudice and hate. Maybe Sarah was right. Maybe it was time to stop running and start fighting. "Okay," he said finally. "I'll meet with them." Sarah's voice brightened. "That's great, Marcus. I'll set it up and let you know the details. In the meantime, try to rest. You've got a lot of people in your corner." The call ended, and Marcus sat in silence, his mind racing. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, he felt a glimmer of hope. They weren't alone in this fight. Later that day, Sarah arrived with a woman named Dr. Evelyn Carter, the director of Families Together. She was in her 50s, with warm brown eyes and a calm, reassuring presence. Marcus liked her immediately. "Thank you for meeting with me," Dr. Carter said, shaking Marcus's hand. "I've been following your story, and I want you to know that you're not alone. There are so many families like yours who have faced similar challenges, and we're here to help." Marcus nodded, feeling a lump form in his throat. "I just want to do what's best for Lily. And that's exactly what we're here to support," Dr. Carter said. "We can provide legal assistance to ensure Greg is held accountable, counseling for you and Lily, and a platform to share your story in a way that feels safe and empowering." Marcus glanced at Lily, who was playing quietly in the corner. "I don't want her to be exposed to more hate." "I understand," Dr. Carter said, "and we'll do everything we can to protect her. But your story is powerful, Marcus. It has the potential to change hearts and minds, to challenge the prejudices that hurt so many families like yours." Marcus took a deep breath, his mind made up. "Okay, let's do it." Over the next few days, Marcus worked closely with Dr. Carter and Sarah to prepare for a press conference. It was nerve-wracking, but he knew it was the right thing to do. He wanted to take control of the narrative, to show the world that love, not race, was what made a family. The day of the press conference arrived, and Marcus stood backstage, his hands trembling. Lily was with Sarah, playing in a nearby room, safely away from the cameras. Dr. Carter placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "You've got this," she said. "Just speak from the heart." Marcus nodded, stepping out onto the stage. The room was packed with reporters, their cameras flashing as he approached the podium. He took a deep breath, looking out at the sea of faces. "My name is Marcus Johnson," he began, his voice steady. "And I'm here today not just as a father, but as a man who believes in the power of love and family." He told his story, the joy of adopting Lily, the challenges they'd faced, and the hate they'd endured. He spoke about Karen's accusations, Greg's threats, and their fight to stay together. His voice cracked at times, but he pressed on, determined to make his message clear. "Love doesn't have a color," he said, his eyes filling with tears. "Family isn't defined by blood or race. It's defined by the love we share, the bonds we build, and the sacrifices we make for one another. Lily is my daughter, and I will do whatever it takes to protect her and give her the life she deserves." The room erupted in applause, and Marcus felt a surge of emotion. For the first time in weeks, he felt seen, heard, and understood. But as he stepped off the stage, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. His heart sank as he read the message. "You think this changes anything? You're still not safe." Marcus's stomach churned. Greg was in custody, so who was sending these messages? And what did they want? The fight wasn't over. Not yet. The text message sent a chill down Marcus's spine. He quickly showed it to Sarah and Dr. Carter, who were waiting backstage. Sarah's face paled as she read it, and Dr. Carter's expression turned grim. "This is serious," Dr. Carter said. "We need to report this to the police immediately." Marcus nodded, his hands trembling as he dialed the number of the officer who had handled Greg's arrest. He explained the situation, and the officer promised to look into it. But Marcus knew it wasn't enough. Whoever was behind this was still out there, and they weren't going to stop. "We need to get you and Lily somewhere safe," Sarah said, her voice filled with urgency. "Somewhere no one can find you." "Where?" Marcus asked, his mind racing. "Greg's in custody, but if he's working with someone else?" "I have an idea," Dr. Carter said. Families Together has a network of safe houses for families in crisis. They're completely off the grid, and only a handful of people know about them. You and Lily can stay there until we figure out who's behind this." Marcus hesitated, glancing toward the room where Lily was playing. He didn't want to uproot her again, but he knew they didn't have a choice. "Okay," he said finally. "Let's do it." Within hours, they were on the road, heading to a safe house in a remote part of the state. The drive was long, and Lily fell asleep in the back seat, her stuffed bunny clutched tightly in her arms. Marcus kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see a car following them. But the road was empty, the landscape stretching out in all directions. When they arrived at the safe house, Marcus felt a small measure of relief. It was a small cabin nestled in the woods, surrounded by trees and far from any main roads. Dr. Carter had arranged for a security team to patrol the area, and Marcus was given a direct line to the local police. "You'll be safe here," Dr. Carter assured him as they unpacked their things. "Take some time to rest and focus on Lily. We'll handle everything else? Marcus nodded, though he couldn't shake the feeling of unease. He didn't know who was targeting them or why, but he knew they couldn't stay hidden forever. Eventually, they would have to face whatever was coming. The days passed slowly, the quiet of the cabin a stark contrast to the chaos they had left behind. Marcus tried to keep things normal for Lily, playing games and reading stories, but his mind was always elsewhere. He couldn't stop thinking about the threats, the messages, the unknown danger lurking just out of sight. One evening, as they sat by the fireplace, Lily looked up at him with her big, innocent eyes. "Daddy, when can we go home?" Marcus's heart ached at the question. "Soon, sweetheart," he said, forcing a smile. "We just need to stay here a little longer." Lily nodded, though she didn't look convinced. "I miss my room." "I know," Marcus said, pulling her into a hug. "I miss it too, but we're going to be okay. I promise." As the days turned into weeks, Marcus began to feel a sense of cabin fever. He was grateful for the safety the cabin provided, but he couldn't shake the feeling that they were trapped. He needed answers, and he needed them soon. One afternoon, Sarah called with an update. "We've been digging into Greg's background," she said, "and we found something interesting. He's connected to a group that's been targeting adoptive families, especially transracial ones. They believe in some twisted ideology that kids should only be raised by parents of the same race." Marcus felt a surge of anger. "So this isn't just about me and Lily? There are others?" "Yes," Sarah said, "and we think Greg was just a small part of it. There's a bigger network at play, and they're the ones sending the threats." Marcus clenched his fists. "What can we do?" "We're working with law enforcement to take them down," Sarah said. "But it's going to take time. In the meantime, you need to stay where you are. It's not safe for you to come out yet." Marcus sighed, running a hand over his face. "I just want this to be over." "I know," Sarah said softly. "And it will be. But we have to be patient." The call ended, and Marcus sat in silence, his mind racing. He didn't know how much longer he could keep Lily in hiding, but he also knew he couldn't risk her safety. They were stuck in a nightmare, and there was no easy way out. One night, as Marcus was tucking Lily into bed, she looked up at him with a serious expression. "Daddy, are the bad people still looking for us?" Marcus hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, sweetheart. But we're safe here, and we're going to stay safe." Lily frowned, her small face filled with worry. "What if they find us?" Marcus's heart ached at the fear in her voice. He knelt down beside her bed, taking her hand in his. "Listen to me, Lily. No matter what happens, I will always protect you. Always. Do you understand?" Lily nodded, though her eyes were still filled with doubt. "I love you, Daddy." "I love you too," Marcus said, kissing her forehead. "Now get some sleep. Tomorrow's a new day." As Lily drifted off to sleep, Marcus sat by her bed, watching her peaceful face. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for certain. He would do whatever it took to keep her safe. But as he sat there, his phone buzzed with another text. His stomach dropped as he read the message. "You can't hide forever." Marcus felt a surge of relief as he called Sarah, his hands trembling. "What happened?" "The police raided the group's headquarters last night," Sarah explained. "They arrested everyone involved, including the person who's been sending you those messages. It's over, Marcus. You and Lily are safe." Marcus sank onto the couch, his legs giving out beneath him. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure," Sarah said. "They found evidence linking the group to multiple crimes, including the threats against you. They're not going to be a problem anymore." Marcus felt tears welling up in his eyes as he looked at Lily, who was watching him with a curious expression. "It's over, sweetheart," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "We're going home?" Lily's face lit up with a smile. "Really? Really?" Marcus said, pulling her into a hug. "We're going home?" The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. Marcus and Lily were escorted back to the city, where they were reunited with their home. The media attention had died down, and the police assured Marcus that the threat was gone for good. Sarah and Dr. Carter helped Marcus navigate the aftermath, connecting him with counseling services and support groups for adoptive families. Marcus was hesitant at first, but he quickly realized how much it helped to talk to others who had faced similar challenges. Lily, too, began to heal. She started seeing a child therapist who helped her process everything she had been through. Slowly but surely, she began to smile again, her laughter filling the house with joy. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Lily looked up at Marcus with a serious expression. "Daddy, are the bad people really gone?" Marcus nodded, pulling her into a hug. "Yes, sweetheart. They're gone, and they're never going to hurt us again." Lily smiled, snuggling closer to him. "I love you, Daddy." "I love you too," Marcus said, kissing the top of her head. "Always." As the weeks turned into months, life began to return to normal. Marcus and Lily settled back into their routine, their bond stronger than ever. The media attention faded, and the world moved on to the next big story. But Marcus never forgot what they had been through. It had changed him, made him stronger and more determined than ever to protect his daughter. He knew there would always be challenges, but he also knew they could face them together. One day, as they were walking through the park, Lily looked up at him with a big smile. "Daddy, can we get ice cream?" Marcus laughed, ruffling her hair. "Of course we can, but only if you promise to share." Lily giggled, taking his hand as they walked toward the ice cream truck. The sun was shining, the birds were singing, and for the first time in a long time, Marcus felt at peace. They had survived the storm, and now they were ready to embrace the sunshine. Together, they would face whatever came next, one step at a time. Love knows no color, and family knows no bounds. Marcus and Lily's story is a powerful reminder that courage and love can overcome even the darkest of times. If this story moved you, hit the like button, share it to spread the message of hope, and subscribe for more inspiring tales of resilience and triumph. Together, we can stand against hate and celebrate the beauty of diversity. Let's show the world that love always wins.